You're listening to the Mindful Mama podcast, episode 96. Today we're talking to Jon Vroman about becoming a front row dad. Welcome to the Mindful Mama podcast. Here it's about becoming a less irritable, more joyful parent. At Mindful Mama, we know that you cannot give what you do not have. And when you are thriving, when you have calm and peace within, then you can give it to your children. I'm your host, Hunter Clark-Field's Mindful Mama mentor. I coach overstressed moms on how to cultivate self-awareness in their daily lives to take family and life to a new level of peace and cooperation. I've been practicing yoga and mindfulness for over 20 years. I'm the creator of the Mindful Parenting course, and I'm the mom of two girls, ages 7 and 10. Thank you so much for being here today, my friend. I'm so glad you're here. If you are new to the Mindful Mama podcast, welcome. So glad you're here. I hope you enjoy this interview. We have some interviews and some solo podcasts here. And I have my recurring guests coming back once a month that you'll hear pretty soon, I'm sure. So today I'm super excited to have you listen to this great conversation with Jon Vroman, and he's incredible. He's incredibly inspiring, and he made me cry a little bit. He inspires others to live life in the front row by teaching the art of moment making. He's an award-winning speaker, a #1 best-selling author of The Front Row Factor, podcast host, and founder of Front Row Foundation, a charity creating front row experiences for individuals who have brave life-threatening illnesses. And this was a really powerful conversation for me, and I think that you'll really enjoy it. Some of the questions and the things we talked about are, about the power of hope, the power of celebration, talking about living in the moment. And we talked about a lot of his fatherhood work and transitioning into being focused on business to focus on fatherhood. And we even talk about anger and how to take care of anger. This was a really powerful episode, so I know that you will get a lot out of it. And before we dive in real quick, I want to just let you know that it's the end of the year. If you're listening in real time, it's the end of the year 2017. And I am currently taking applications for my group coaching program, the Mindful Mama Transformation Group. This is only for 6 women. So if you're interested in that, you can find it at Mindful Mama Mentor/group coaching. And I am completely booked up in my one-on-one coaching practice. So it's kind of going over to waitlist, but we will be starting again in January. And if you are interested in booking a clarity call now, which is a complimentary half-hour call where we get to talk. If you book that call now, then we can lock in the 2017 prices. So I invite you to check that out over at mindfulmamamentor.com/work with me. And now on to this episode. Jon, thank you so much for coming on the Mindful Mama podcast. I'm so glad that you could be here today.
Hey, this is a great moment. I'm excited.
Yay. So I have already introduced you, and we learned, as the person behind the Front Row, foundation. So tell us a little bit more about what that is for the listener who has no idea. What is the Front Row Foundation, and what do you do with that?
Oh, see, that's a dangerous question for me. I like to talk, and this is my passion. So, but I'll attempt to share with you the short version, and then you can take us anywhere you want to go. Front Row Foundation is a charity that we started, meaning myself and some friends in Philadelphia, just on the outskirts, a little town called Blackwood, New Jersey. And we started this in 2005 to help kids and adults who have a life-threatening illness to get a front row experience at the event of their dreams. So this was sporting events, concerts, Broadway, or any type of live performance. And then we wanted to create a community after that where they could learn the life skills needed to live every day in the front row, like mindfulness. And we wanted to be a little bit of a mixture between Make-A-Wish and Tony Robbins. That was kind of my space. I spent a lot of time in the Tony Robbins world, and I was a senior leader on his team, and I loved those skills. They changed my life. And then I was exposed to this community over here with the charity, and I thought, why don't we just merge those two? That hadn't been done before. And why don't we create this, what we call now our front row family? And so it's a wish granting organization with a life philosophy. And that philosophy is about being in the front row of your life. And the front row of life is just a metaphor for getting close to the things that matter most to you, getting close to the people, getting close to the places and the thoughts and the things that light us up and make us come alive, just like why we choose to go sit front row and at our favorite events, because they make us come alive. And, those are moments that we cherish. Those are experiences that we cherish. And I think we can live life kind of in the back, kind of as a spectator, checked out of the event of our life, or we can step up and get close to what matters most. And that's what we want to help people do. We want to help people be in the front row of their life. We want to help people be moment makers, because we all have this certain number of moments in our lives. And our job is to make the most of them. We didn't do anything to earn or deserve this day. I mean, even if we wear our seatbelt and eat healthy and take care of ourselves, take care of our kids, these days are gifts that we get. And our goal is to maximize the moments. In our dad's community, we always say that when your child's born until they're 18, you have 936 weekends, roughly. And so, and every one that goes by, that you'll never get that back. So that's what we do. That's the mission. And so now I write about it, speak about it, run the charity, do the podcast, and that's the world.
Wow. That's so cool. So can you share a story of somebody who has, a child who has had a life-threatening illness, who has gone, what event they chose, and then what happened to them afterwards?
Oh, I could share 100 of them. It's so difficult to pick, but let me share one and maybe even a couple, because I think there's different lessons from them, and I'm sure we'll get to those in the show. But one that is very early on for me that solidified my passion for what we do here was a little girl that we met who was 4. Her name is Sophie, and she lived just outside of Philadelphia. A friend of mine was a friend of her family's, her mom, Sophie's mom, Lauren. And he came to me and he said, hey, this little girl, she's so sweet and she's battling for her life. She has this brain tumor. And it's just a really tough situation for, of course, everybody, not only the recipient, the person that's battling it, but everybody, that's involved, the family. And when I first heard that she was I said, but my question was, of course, like, well, what event would she want to see? And he said, she's a huge Kelly Clarkson fan. Now, I didn't have kids at the time, but I was like, at 4, how big of a fan could you really be? And we talked to the mom, Lauren, who's now is a close personal friend of ours. And we see them, communicate with them, talk with them, and have for now over a decade. But her mom said, my daughter knows all the words to all the songs. If we get in the car and we don't play Kelly Clarkson, she cries until we do. And she is a massive fan. And I was like, we have to do this. So we created this event where we took Sophie and we took her to the Rainforest Cafe in a limousine. And it was her sister, brother, her grandparents, it was everybody there, and our event hosts. And one of the things that was super special was that during the show, Kelly knew, we had got word to Kelly, she knew that Sophie was there, and found her in the crowd and gave her a little shout out, a little point in the crowd to say, I see you. And that was like a magic moment. And for Sophie, it could have all been over at that point. But what she didn't know was that our good friend, Jon Vroman, who has been a moment maker many times over for our charity by opening up doors and offering connections in making introductions, he set up a meet and greet with Kelly. So we got backstage and we took Sophie back there, and Sophie was so tired. It was late at night and exhausted. She was fighting for her life at this point too. So keep that in mind. And she was, almost falling asleep in her mother's arms. We thought she was asleep. And then Kelly walks in and goes, hey, y'all. And little Sophie just wakes up, turns around, they lock eyes. And when they lock eyes, we have this picture. And that picture
Oh.
is hanging 2 feet from where I stand right now talking to you, and has hung on my wall ever since then for now a decade.
Oh.
And when I look at that picture, I'm reminded of why we do what we do, and the power of moments, the power of these little moments. We often say that these micro moments lead to mega movements in our lives. And these movements, like for me, this has become a passion for life. Because you see that impact. You hear somebody say, I was able to forget about cancer for the day. You hear somebody say, I love Front Row because you celebrate life year in and year out for your recipients. And one half of our recipients pass away after their event.
Mm.
One half go on to make a full recovery, but we celebrate both. We celebrate the life of people, whether they're with us or not. And Sophie, the part that I hate talking about in this story is that, about a month after her event, that was it for Sophie. We lost her.
Mm. Wow.
And one of my best friends now in the world, his name's John Berghoff, his wife Mara Berghoff. They were the event hosts. We send people to take pictures and video and get food and make sure all the details are handled. And John told a story recently that I didn't even know this until a couple years ago. And that is that John went to the funeral after the event. He was invited to the funeral because we become like family with our
Mm.
recipients.
Mhm.
And John went to the funeral, and he said he walked up and he looked at Sophie laying in the casket, and her mom Lauren had laid the VIP pass that got her
Oh.
backstage on Sophie's body.
Oh my gosh.
And that image, that memory, that moment, the connection with her family. Even to this day, I will tell you that I was in South Jersey at a restaurant 2 years ago, and I walked in and I saw Lauren, Sophie's mom. She was there. And I just happened to be wearing our charity's t-shirt, which had all the names of all the recipients for a decade that we had done. And as soon as I walked in, she saw me. I was wearing the shirt, and she immediately gave me this huge hug. And she's like, my greatest fear was that people would forget about Sophie, and you've helped keep her memory alive. And for that, thank you. And she just gave me a big hug, and she told everybody who was around us about the charity and about why her daughter's name was on my shirt. And that's a story that comes to mind. And there's, I share that with you, and I love telling the story, and I don't love telling the story for the obvious reasons. I don't love telling it because it has a sad ending, if you will. I
Yeah.
do love telling it because I love that we've been able to make this connection with the family. We've been able to serve in a way that feels meaningful, and I think that's the way giving works, right? Like I think people often, I've been challenged over the years. They'll say, how do you create these front row events when like somebody out there is like doesn't have clean water? And I'd say if you're asking me to compare whether or not I should give somebody a glass of water that doesn't have any to going to a front row event, I can't tell you that the event is more important than that if you do the direct comparison. What I can tell you is that I love the thought, and it was said by Howard Thurman, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, and go do that, because what the
Yeah.
world needs is for people who've come alive. And our piece of the puzzle is this piece. And somebody is supposed to dig the wells for the water. Somebody is supposed to fly the planes. Somebody
Mhm.
is supposed to teach in schools. Somebody is supposed to be a doctor. Somebody is supposed to be a podcast host. Somebody is supposed to teach mindful mamas. And we're all supposed to play our role. And so that's the role that I play, is helping people be moment makers and to celebrate life and to have hope and to have celebration and to be able to live in the moment all the way through.
Oh my God. My heart, that's an intense, intense, incredible story, John. I mean, that's amazing that you have created this, not only this work for yourself, right, where you get to thrive and you get to come alive and do this work, but that it can impact people in such a huge way. I mean, to make, I just feel really choked up that you get to make these moments for people that And for you to, and I really appreciate also, it's funny, like you guys are, I don't usually cry on the podcast, Jon. Thanks.
Okay, let it go. Let it go. It's good.
But it's funny because I do actually mention, like, my recurring guest Carlo jokes with me a lot that I'm very morbid because I mention death a lot, because I think that, and I think that what I'm seeing, and also the work that you do and the way you're kind of showing up in the world with this, is that this your work is a memento mori every single day. You know, that's what they call it in the art world, is a memento mori, when there's a reminder of death in a painting or a piece of art. And the reminder of death, and the way, you know, and they also do that in spiritual traditions, just reminding us of death, is just, I think, is the most powerful way to embrace life, right? To remember that this little stuff that we are worried about is so you know, to just remind ourselves again and again and again, because we forget, that's natural, but to remind ourselves that this is precious, that this breath is precious, that walking on the earth is a miracle, you know?
That's right. Yeah, you nailed it. That is exactly it. And I wrote about this in the book. I was actually going to include this in the subtitle of the book in the beginning. I was going to write about how, you know, I was going to include the word death in somehow, some way in the title, because to me, I started this to be a giver and to be a moment maker for other people, but I didn't predict that I would be one of the biggest beneficiaries of this work by being reminded at all times that our days are gifts and that we didn't earn them and we don't deserve them. It is a gift for us is to be cherished. And it wasn't until, you know, all these experiences and all these reminders of how finite our time is here, depending on your beliefs and whether or not there's an afterlife and all that. The point is, there's an end to this part, right? To this ride. And that is to be cherished. And because there's a finite amount, it has value more so. Because we acknowledge death, it has more value. The reason that gold is worth something or diamonds is because there's a finite amount. And with time, you know, I pulled out this journal one time on an airplane when I had young kids, and I was getting very aware to the fact that I wasn't in control. And like, if this plane went down, that would be it. Like the ride would be over. And I remember pulling out a journal and thinking about my life. I put a little dot on the left side. It said birth. On the right side, it said death. And I said, let me just imagine for a moment that I lived to be 100. And let's say that 80 of those years are great years where I could do anything. Where was I at the moment was at about age 37. And I put a little dot there and I just saw the whole thing. And to me, that was my wake-up call. That was the moment where the finite ending or the finite piece of this doesn't terrify me, doesn't paralyze me, it motivates me. That mortality creates vitality because it reminds me of how much it matters. So it's never easy, right? But I'm always like, go for meaningful, not easy, right? Like search for meaning, not what's easy. And this is meaningful work. You know?
That's amazing. And I love it. And in your book, which I want people to check out, is called The Front Row Factor, Transform Your Life with the Art of Moment Making. And I think it's on its way to my house. I haven't gotten to see it, but I'm excited because this is kind of
it is. The team is on it. Yes.
This is like, I get to talk to you about it beforehand. So that's totally fine. So you have created this work where to me, it's amazing that you're able to, how did the whole Front Row Factor start? Like, how does one create a charity where you're able to do this? I mean, I don't want to spend our whole conversation on this, but I think it's just, I'm just incredibly curious about how do you go about starting to do something like that?
Luckily, I've practiced this answer over the years, so I can sum it up pretty well. There were the way it starts is there were three things that happened in my life at the same time, and these are relevant to your listeners, so everybody can play along here. The first one was when Tony Robbins would ask in our community about where you're contributing in the world and how do you feel about that, and how would you rate yourself, and it was an evaluation and a vision, right? For me, when I was asked the question of how I was contributing to the world, I didn't like the way I felt about that. I didn't felt there was more there for me. So that was a question that was seated in my mind. How would I contribute to the world? The second thing that happened, this all happened around in the same period of a few months. Second thing that happened was I went to a Jason Mraz concert in Philly at the Kimmel Center on my birthday. And it was 2005. And I remember sitting in the back row and I looked to the front row and I saw this group of ladies having the time of their life, right? And I remember looking in the back and I saw people kind of checked out. And then it hit me. I was like, same moment, drastically different experiences. Same moment, drastically different experiences. And I was like, wow, you could really just be a spectator of life, checked out in the back, or you could be upfront, fully engaged, participating. Mm-hmm. And you are a participant when you're that way. You don't have to be on stage all the time. In fact, that was a clarification that I had, which is that, we oftentimes hear the get in the game analogy. Nothing wrong with that, right? I'm all about it. I love playing the game. But we almost put down being on the sidelines. Like people will put down the idea when I say you're a participant in the front row. They're like, you're still a spectator. And I go, ask any band if they feel like their front row is a participant in the experience. I said the best fans get the best show.
Hell yeah.
And I believe that we shouldn't go through our life always asking ourselves, how can I play the game? How can I be the star? How can I be the celebrity? How can I trust? I'm a professional speaker. I love being on stage. I love being the center of attention. I love being the star. But that doesn't mean that I need to be there all the time. In fact, the front row philosophy is about showing up for other people. It's about lifting others up. It's making somebody else the rock star. It's not asking yourself always like, who's in your front row cheering you on, which is a great question, but it's also about whose front row are you in? Who are you cheering on? Mm-hmm. So this was all very clear to me, right? So this thought. Then the third thing happened, which is that my buddy challenged me to run an ultra marathon, which was a 52-mile run. And I wasn't a runner. And I remember telling him no. I was like, flat out, heck no. I think I probably used some stronger language than that. But I was like, I'm not a runner. I have bad knees. I did gymnastics and karate when I was a kid. Everybody told me I had bad knees. And I had this identity that I'm not a runner. But I was also in the place of my life of questioning old limiting beliefs. So I said, I'm in. Now, I don't know what that actually, like, I was like, I didn't even know the first thing. I'd never run a half marathon. I'd never run a full marathon. And I said yes to a 52-mile marathon. And by the way, this was in 16 weeks.
Oh my God.
He wanted to run it in 16 weeks. If you Google running a marathon, it's like, you need like a year to train. So here's what happened. Short story is, the short story in the end is that we did it. But let me tell you what happened along the way. The magic was along one of our runs, our training runs. It was right around Fairmount Park in Philadelphia that my buddy Jamie and I were talking, and we said, we should raise money for a charity. With this run, we should that's what you do, right? Isn't that what you're supposed to do? And then we said, wait a minute. What if we started a charity? What would your perfect charity look like? What would you do? And then I said, well, what's our greatest fear and our greatest love? Because if you can tap into that, if you know what that is, what you want to move towards and what you want to move away from, you'll know never-ending fuel for your life. And I said, my greatest love is moments with friends, experiences where we can tell those stories for life. Mm-hmm. And I want to live a life full and rich of experiences. And my greatest fear is having that cut short. And so I said, what if we help people who are fighting for their life to have the best day of their life and then to live the best life imaginable for as many days as they get? And that was the day Front Row Foundation was born. And then from there, I will tell you something that I think is very appealing to people. Often ask, like, how do you start a charity? And I go, starting it is easy. For $1,000 on legal Zoom, you can file the paperwork, and in about 3 months, you're probably going to get a notice that says, guess what? You're a charity. Getting to be a charity is a piece of cake. Actually doing the charity work is a whole other game. And that became a 12-year learning cycle for us. Wow. But I think what's relevant to your audience is this. It's number one is asking, how do you rate yourself on how you're contributing to the world right now? And what do you want that to look like? right? And then asking yourself, are you a spectator of life in the back, or are you a participant up front? And are you lifting others up right now? And then number 3 is, what's your greatest fear and what's your greatest love? And it's okay to know what those are. It's okay to know what you don't want and what you do want, because your not to-do list is as important as your to-do list. And when you get clear about some of those things, I think you start to find your way into a life that you love.
Wow. Wow. That's an amazing story. I mean, I love that you're doing that. And I'm one of these people who I never could, like, I never had it in me to sort of like conform to, to a regular job. And I always had to do the, like, I always had to do sort of the hard thing. And I don't know, or I always had to sort of follow my passion. I felt like it was killing me,
Yes.
to do something that, that wasn't that. And amazingly, and with great persistence, I've been able to create a livable income and support my family and things on that, which is amazing. And I'm so thrilled about, and I really do believe that, I do believe in that quote, like that the world does need people to come alive and do what they want to do. And it's just, that is such a rabbit hole of issues that we could go into about,
Totally.
why that is. But that's amazing. I love that, Jon. I love that you have, helped yourself come alive and helped other people come alive with the experience, and to have these optimal, amazing experiences where they can be truly present and they can be truly appreciating, these incredible things in life. That's rocks. That rocks. Rock on. That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
Yeah. And you have taken this Front Row Foundation, and it's grown into so many things, and it's still supporting children, and also you've taken it and you've taken these lessons, and now you're sharing these lessons with the world.
That's right.
Awesome.
Yeah. We say, when we wrote the book, and we were looking and looking and looking for, like, how do you sum this book up in one sentence? Like, wow, what is that? And we struggled for a year to try to do that. And finally it hit us. It was this. It was that this book is everything you can learn about living life from people fighting for it. And that's what it was. We looked back and we were just like, wow, what did these people teach us? And there's so many of those lessons. In fact, can I share a couple with your audience?
Hell yeah.
Because I think this is a part, when I think about what's super relevant to especially parents, especially mamas, especially mindful mamas, and anybody. Like, it doesn't matter who you are listening to this. When we looked back and we were looking for the pattern, we were looking for what's working here. We were looking for, why is this so powerful? Why is this moving people? And there were 3 forces at work that we noticed. And it wasn't until a decade in that we put this together. The first one was the power of hope. And hope is the power of bringing future moments into this one. So I want to say that again, because I think that's really important, is that hope is the power of bringing future moments into this one. And I'll give you an example of how this worked. So one of our recipients, Thomas K., was a young man from Canada who was an avid rugby player and the picture of health. And very quickly, he was in a wheelchair, losing his eyesight, and fighting for his life. It would seem to be overnight. And we knew that Thomas wanted to go see the Rugby World Cup in New Zealand. So we raised the money, we bought the tickets, we unveiled it to him that he was going to be doing this, and he was super excited. But what we found out later was that his family told us that when Thomas went to physical therapy, it was like he was a new man. He had a new mission, and he would say that he needed to be able to stand for the national anthem at his game. So the power of that future moment brought power to his present moment. And I think that we can never underestimate the power of hope. And I think it's important for people to also understand that hope, I think, is very different than wishful thinking. Wishful thinking says, I wish things were different. Hope says, I make the difference.
Yeah.
So we saw that, right? We saw that at play. The second thing that we saw, the second force that was at work, was celebration. And celebration is the art of using past moments to bring power to this one. So to celebrate, we underestimated what it would be like for our recipients to get their photo books and their albums and to share them with their friends and to relive the memory. We were really focused on the day in the beginning. We didn't see fully the power and the potential of that celebration piece until later. And one of the stories that really, man, got to me, like straight to the heart, was this story of a young man named Mike who was 16 by age, but because of all the challenges that he faced, he was developmentally at about age 9.
Wow.
And he was a super fan of like anything pirates. So Pirates of the Caribbean, anything pirates. We found that there was this pirate show in Myrtle Beach. It was like the best pirate show that we could find. And Mike had never been on an airplane, which he did with our event. He'd never been in a hotel, which he did for a first. He never saw the ocean, which he did at this event. And it was a day, we'd never ridden in a limo, and he did at this event. It was a day of firsts, and he was so fired up. Like the videos, it's just great. And all these, by the way, are all the stories, all the pictures, all the video, everything I'm saying is all at our website. FrontRowFoundation.org is the site if anybody wants to go look at it. But the most powerful part of this story was what happened afterwards, which is when Mike got home, he was really struggling, really fighting for his life. And one of our event directors, and also a friend and a former board member and just a wonderful human being, Carrie Smolinski, who lives in Chicago, he's got such a big heart. He went to go see the family in the hospital. Not required. We didn't ask him to. He just knew it was the right thing to do. Went to the hospital, saw the family. And he called me and he said, hey man, when I walked into the room, I saw Mike there. And he was like hooked up to all these tubes, like out of every single part of his body. And he was sitting there with his photo album from his Front Row event. And he was just flipping through the pictures and he was just looking at it. And that's when it hit me that what we do extends beyond the day. This isn't just about giving somebody tickets for an hour to go see a show. This is about affecting their future, their past, and every piece of it. And so hope and celebration were really clear. And then what we recognized, and it was actually from the words of a recipient, her name was Melissa Weaver, and we sent her to go see Sarah McLachlan. And that was a really special show. She was a woman who was a mom and lives in Richmond, Virginia, sweet, sweet soul, wonderful human. Well, she has a mama's group, what they call them, something like it's like the 8 mamas or something, but they have a mamas group. It's really special. And she said to me that what Front Row really taught her was how to live in the moment, that she hadn't been doing that she wasn't being fully present, that she had spent a lot of her life not being in the moment. And that after her Front Row event, she committed and vowed to be in the moment and to have experiences more in life, and not to chase the things that we think make us happy, but the things that truly bring joy and love into our life. And those are the experiences with people we love. And so what we recognized was that while hope brings future moments, right, into this one, and celebration brings past moments into this one, the whole game is about being present in the moment. So when you talk about mindfulness, like you're speaking directly to my heart, because I think that's the way it's all built. Like I have a fascination with mindfulness because I feel like that's the key to not letting life slip by unnoticed, unappreciated, uncelebrated, right? And I feel like that's where it all comes to. So we're just have this swinging pendulum of looking into the future and looking into the past and constantly moving in and out of the present moment. And the more that we can find that center place and the more that we can be in the moment, we realize that hope brings presence, celebration brings presence, and it's all about being here now for the time that we have.
Yeah, this is the only moment that life can be lived is this
That's right.
moment, I love that. Hope is my youngest daughter's middle name.
Oh, awesome.
It's
So cool.
yeah, that's actually I grew up in Rhode Island. It happens to be the state motto of Rhode Island is
Is that right?
yes, you didn't know that, did you?
That's cool. Way to learn
Yeah.
something every day.
Yeah, you do. I love that. That this is bringing people in the present moment. It's interesting because as you talked about these three forces at work, for me coming from that mindfulness background and thinking about the future and then bringing the past into this one, but you're right, it really is about taking that energy of the past and excitement of the past and bringing it into this moment, and it is about being present and yeah, and just that whole idea of like allowing people to or coming back to in you know, being present in the moment and that appreciation. It's all
That's
it's
right.
all in there. It's all
That's
in
right.
there. That's so cool. So as you did this work and these huge life lessons kind of came to you and these big reminders of death and these incredible stories of people, and you yourself, you're a dad. And this is like one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you for the Mindful Mama podcast is because you're running retreats for men and fathers retreats and talking about best practices in fatherhood. And I think this is so exciting because I teach a mindful parenting course, and we talk about mindfulness, we talk about skillful communication. And one of the biggest challenges people have is with my partner, how do I talk to him? How do I let him know that when he's threatening the kids that this is really harming the relationship? Like, and how do I work on myself while my partner is, this kind of thing. And it's really one of the biggest challenges. And I love that you're doing this work with fatherhood. And I'm wondering how you decided to do this and how you decided to do some work with fatherhood in your own life.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's so fun, the evolution of one's business or mission and how it all comes together. I didn't see this one coming. I was making a living as a keynote speaker, and I was giving 40 plus keynote presentations a year, and
Wow.
loved it. And I still do, but just not as many. I just charge more and do less. But what happened was there's actually a reason why I do less now. And it's actually part of the story. 2 years ago, I was at a party and somebody had said, hey, what do you do? And I immediately went into like, I'm a speaker, I'm a coach, I run this charity. And then I paused and I cut myself off and I was like, wait a minute. I go, what I do is I'm a father and I'm a husband. Now, when I'm not doing that, I happen to be a speaker and a coach and run this charity. But it was that shift
Mm.
that made a huge difference in the way I thought about my life. See, I used to be a businessman with a family, and now I'm a family man with a business. And to
Mm.
me, that was a turning point moment where I was like, wait a minute, I'm failing in this department. So I started looking at my life a little bit. I remember opening up within a day of that encounter. I opened up my computer and was looking at all my files, right? And I said, oh, I've got a file for Front Row Foundation. I've got a file for taxes. I've got a file for all these things in my life, right? Like book reviews and the next business, whatever project it was. And I was like, wait a minute, there's no family file. I literally spend days planning our future fundraiser for Front Row Foundation, but I haven't spent days planning our family life. I haven't taken that time.
Mm.
And I thought that's something's wrong. And if your calendar is a reflection of your values, man, I had invested that year in a speaking course to become a better speaker. I paid like $25,000 to go to this course. I went to another conference called Mastermind Talks. And then I went to another conference and I did these things. And I was like, well, I'm growing myself over here and I'm growing my business over here, but where's the dad stuff? I'm not doing it. Like, where's the better husband, better dad? Wasn't there. So I thought, how do I like to learn? I like to learn from immersion experiences. I believe in the philosophy and that old quote of, if you ask the woodsman, to chop down these trees, what would his strategy be? He's like, I'd spend the most of the time sharpening the axe. right? And I love that idea of retreating to advance. I've benefited from it in every other area of my life. So I started looking for dad stuff. Now I know guys in the space, and I know some dad experts that they do amazing work, but they didn't have the retreat that I craved, the size of the retreat, the type of guys. And so I said, I have this skill set. I've done this for years. I'm going to create the event I want to attend. And that's what it was. It was October of 2016. We ran our first retreat. 30 guys came together, and it was mostly kind of mostly entrepreneurial minded or spirited people. So a lot of, self-employed business owners, coaches, authors, speakers, people in that space, real estate investors. But now we have a lot of different people in the group. We have a neurosurgeon, we have a psychologist, we have all different types of people. We have guys that are retired, all different types of people. But the one thing that's pure about this group, they're true about this group, is that there are three things they stand for. And I think this is important too for your listeners. They stand for brotherhood, creating a community of people that are like-minded, like-hearted. They believe in shared strategies. So we always talk about best practices, in our workshops, and the cream rises to the top. We vote up best ideas. And then it's all about purpose, deepening our sense of purpose as fathers, because that purpose pulls us forward, reconnecting to the purpose. And, while it's always there, we can lose sight of that. We can lose attachment to that. We can lose our way of, why does this matter so much? And so to get that time has been very, very powerful. That's the group, and that's what we do.
That's so cool. And so how has this learning and stuff about fatherhood shifted in your own life and your own experiences with your kids?
Well, two things. One is, I said, Tatiana, my wife, said to me months ago, she said, you've been massively impacted by the front row dads. I can tell, like she could see it. And I had a front row dad call me out, which was great. We had a wonderful lunch. He's a friend of mine. And, I remember talking to him and saying, hey, what makes a great friend? And we were like, we both agreed, honesty, right? Like telling you something that maybe other people don't want to tell you. And I said to my friend, I said, tell me something nobody wants to tell me. And he says, I don't think you spend enough time with your kids. And I was like, whoa, really?
That's a hard thing to hear.
I pride myself on being an engaged father, but I was actually selling myself that I was doing an awesome job. And he had the courage to tell me I wasn't. And I asked myself, what would really stepping up look like? And right about that time, my wife was she had a relative in Russia. She's from Siberia. And my wife came to me and said, my aunt's really sick. I think I need to go, right? Like I need to go now. And I said, it was right in that moment that in the past, I would have been like, oh, we got to figure out the kid thing. And, I'm really nervous about the business and blah, 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 blah. And I just looked at her and I said, totally do it. Take any amount of time you need. I totally got the kids. And she went for 2 weeks. And I had the kids, both boys, by myself for 2 weeks. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was in those 2 weeks that I learned what that really meant to be an engaged dad. I never would have predicted that I could have had a massive improvement in the relationship with my boys. I never would have told you that. And at the end of the 2 weeks, I was like, Tatiana needs to leave again at some point for me to be fully responsible for these boys from morning, noon, and night. Because not only did I learn to appreciate her more, but I learned to appreciate my boys. I connected with them on a real deep level. We bonded. And it was great. And I wouldn't have happened without the front row dads and our conversations and this opportunity to really step up, because I'm surrounded by, in the group, we have 50 guys, and I'm surrounded by 50 amazing dads. Like some of these guys, like they're amazing fathers. And it wasn't until I saw them interacting and, and sharing and telling me what they're doing, and that I really got challenged, to up my game, because I do have like a healthy competitive side to myself. I am influenced by the people around me. It's fact. So I'm like, this is good. And my wife would say that. And one of my best friends is a guy named Hal Elrod. He wrote a book called The Miracle
He
Morning.
was on the podcast.
Was he really?
Way earlier, yeah.
That's awesome. So Hal's one of my best friends, and we have a shared event together in California every year. It's the Best Year Ever Blueprint and Front Row Celebration. And this year, as you know, Hal fought cancer. He had acute lymphoblastic leukemia. He's our number one donor. A portion of all the Miracle Morning book sales support Front Row Foundation, and he became a recipient this year.
Wow.
And it was during this time when we were talking at the event about his recipient experience, and we were telling the audience about front row dads and how we're all connected. Hal's a front row dad, and his wife Ursula grabs the mic and goes, "Hey, I just got to say something that I think everybody in here, women, you should send your men to the Front Row Dads retreat, because Hal came back a totally different guy, a totally different dad." And I think that's really cool when guys can, even like Hal, who's literally world famous author, very accomplished guy, and a super dad, still had room to grow.
That's so cool. So I love that. And one of the things that we talk about a lot in mindful parenting and in the mindful mama community is one of the things that for women is really hard for women to talk about and speak about and have a lot of shame about is our anger and how we get triggered at our kids, yelling at our kids. And there's really no, it's almost it's changing, but for many women, it's almost unspeakable. And so we talk about our anger in the mindful parenting group and the work that we do. And we talk about our triggers and how to take care of that and how to reduce our reactivity and things like that. So I'm wondering about in your Front Row Dads group, and have you talked about your triggers and your anger, and what strategies have you guys come up with that have to, if you have to take care of your anger?
Yeah, this is definitely a big one. And even at our last retreat, managing our emotions was a whole topic around that. Like how do we manage our emotions? And I think that's a really big topic. And there's a lot of different there's a lot of strategies around it. There really is. And you could go, and the guys have shared tons of ideas. I could literally choose from 100. And interestingly, they're all connected and some more obvious than not, right? Because it's almost like when you get to, why is that anger showing up, right? And sometimes it's literally like people aren't sleeping enough and they need more sleep. And when they get more sleep, it solves the problem. They're just not as angry. Sometimes it's literally their diet. We've had discussions around gluten and how that affects people and their tolerance and their emotions. So it could be diet related. Certainly, if somebody's got a drinking problem, or they're drinking too much, or they're eating a lot of sugars and they've got these massive spikes and their body's going crazy, that affects our emotions, right?
Absolutely.
We talk about personal care from how are you taking care of yourself by just getting time, pulling over the car on the way home and getting 10 minutes, to decompress, having some type of transition routine. I work upstairs in my office and I can be at my children's toes in 32 seconds. So how do I give myself transition time? What does my schedule look like? We talk a lot about the miracle morning because that's Hal's thing and he's part of our group. And we talk about how when I wake up with the kids, it's a bad start right from the get-go because I'm still trying to get going and they need something right away. But if I wake up an hour before them and I take time and I get a cup of coffee or I stretch or I read a little book or I look at my calendar for the day, when my kids all of a sudden wake up and come down, I'm like, hey, buddy, I'm ready for you, right? Like I've noticed that just by providing an hour extra in the morning, my anger in the morning was removed completely. That handled it 100%. The other thing that helped, and our dads have talked about this, is when you're out of work, you're really out of work. We think we're good multitaskers, but we're not. And when you get a lot of times we get frustrated because we're trying to do 3 things and our kids need our attention. And some of those things are important, and it's just hard being a parent, and that's hard. It's just, you're going to get angry sometimes. Some of those things you could just avoid, like One of our guys brought up at our first retreat, which is, he goes, we have a gun safe and we don't own a gun, but what we do put in the gun safe as a ceremony every night is the cell phones. So we pull out the gun safe. My kids walk over with my cell phone. They put it in the safe. We lock it up, and I don't touch it until the next morning.
That's great.
And some people would say, "Well, I can't do that." And listen, this doesn't apply to everybody. You have to use the tools that work for you. But the reality is that, you might not be able to do it until you set your life up so that people know you're not going to be checking your phone. And they'll text you sometime and something will happen, but they'll eventually learn that you're checked out, that you're with family. Mm-hmm. So I think there's all these different types of strategies that help us to reduce anger. And they all work in different ways. They all work differently for different people. But, I think sometimes it's also, I've learned this too. This was a big one for me recently, was that whoever's the person who's least triggered is responsible for that conversation. So if like for me and my wife, as an example, like a lot of times anger isn't about with just our kids. It's actually the parents are fighting, and then it translates over into the kids, right? It spills over into the kid conversation, or because we've been so tested in our marriage or our relationship that then we have very little to deal and tolerate with our children when they enter the picture. So one of the things that I've learned and has been really helpful for me is that when two people are triggered, the person who is the least triggered is now responsible for that conversation, is responsible to heal that conversation, to be a listener for the other person, to put their needs on a shelf, right? I learned this from my counselor, Tess. She's wonderful. And she says, hey, it's not that your needs aren't important. You just put them on a shelf because you're the most conscious person in that moment. And your job is to lead, versus like sometimes our anger is like, you're not listening to me. You don't hear my point. You're not doing what I'm saying. Versus a lot of times with anger, if we can like just consciously practice this in advance so that when the time comes, you'll be better at it, is to just imagine yourself just taking literally like with your hand, like take your needs and your point of view and all your righteousness and put it on a shelf next to you, right? And say, I'll come back to that. It's valid. It's important. I'll address it, but I'm just not going to address it now, because there's nothing I'm going to say when people are angry that's going to settle in. And what's interesting is that my anger was handled a lot more with that strategy because I didn't feel the need to make my point all the time. I think sometimes anger is when people don't do what we say to do or don't, right? And it's like we go into a dictatorship mode versus a listening mode. And when we listen, we connect. And when we connect, we can then move somebody. Until you match and mirror somebody's energy, connect with them, build a rapport, if they feel heard, witnessed, healed, then you can move them. But whoever's got the higher level of consciousness, whoever's the least triggered, it's their responsibility to move the dialogue. And I think those are some of the things that we've talked about, some of the things we've explored around the topic of anger.
I love that, of what you said about when we listen, we connect, and when we connect, we can move somebody. And that, and you're absolutely right. The person who's least triggered, and hopefully, hopefully for us, like as the adults, we can be the
least triggered, right?
Hopefully,
Totally.
And we can then that's a great saying, put your needs on a shelf. But that idea of, when we're in this mode of righteousness, it's like, and this idea that, we just want to be right, and we just want to fix the other person, or we just want to fix our child. So if they would just do what we said, then everything would be okay. But when we listen, we connect, and when we connect, we move somebody. And that's so true. Like there's such a healing power in listening, and just listening provides so much relief. And that's the step I think we skip so often with our children, is just this idea of acknowledgement, saying, I hear you, I see you, like really hearing them, really seeing them, really acknowledging what's going on for them. And just that simple step can just, like decompress everything and really reduce all that tension. And then we can connect, and then we can move somebody. And that's beautiful. I love that you talked about, self-care, and that doing one thing at a time. But yes, when we listen, we connect, and that listening is very, very powerful. It's great stuff. Wow. So I love that you're doing this work with dads. I think it's hugely, hugely powerful. And I like that with the work that you're doing with this Friend Foundation. I was checking out what you're doing and this idea, and you mentioned it a little bit. We talked obviously about mindset and we talked about relationships, but this idea of environment, like you said, you put yourself in the environment of people who help you to step up to a greater place. And in your work you've created an environment of people who have these values and things like that. And I think that environment is kind of like, it's like kind of like, when we eat, we take in the nutriments of the food, and we have to think about that the people and the conversations and maybe the podcast or the media, the things that we take in, these are also things that we take in and nourish ourselves in the same way. And you're kind of speaking to that, I think, when you talk about this idea of environment, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yeah. When we were trying to dissect what was happening for the book, we found those three focuses I shared earlier. And then we found that there were three forces. Sorry, there were three areas of focus then for people. So the three forces of hope, celebration, and living in the moment. And then the three pieces, the three factors that allowed them to play this out was relationships, mindset, and environment. Those were the three things. So big piece of it was who's in our front row and whose front row are we in, the relationships in our lives. And we teach something about like knowing the 8 most important people in your life and what are their dreams and how are you helping them to fulfill those dreams as being one of the actionable things. Those 8 people hang on the wall next to me at all times. And I always know what their dreams are. The second piece about mindset is just how we view any situation, right? And that's your world. You're an expert in that space. And we see it all the time that, listen, you could say wherever you go, there you are. Like if you have a crappy mindset and you're in an awesome environment, sometimes you bring toxicity to that place. And you can do that. You can take something toxic, pour it in a beautiful environment. It doesn't work, so you do need to have the mindset piece. And I think that's been explored a lot, and it's great. And we have recipients that teach us about mindset all the time. I'll tell you one story that I think is so important on this topic. One of our recipients, Nikki, just recently went to go see a Dallas Cowboys game. She was in her 30s fighting breast cancer. Beautiful person from South Jersey, works at Rowan University, a school that raises money for Front Row Foundation as well. And she was in the limousine and I was with her and she said, hey, we're about to go into a restaurant. She goes, hey, sometimes people look at me when I'm losing my hair and it's turned a different color and maybe I don't look as great as I normally do. People will look at me and they'll almost look at me with like a look of disgust. And she said that and my heart kind of sank and I kind of got sad. She said it and was like, if I could ever get my hand on that person, I was kind of angry. And then she said immediately, and it makes me happy. and it was like the last thing I was expecting her to say. She goes, it makes me happy. And I said, all right, you got to tell me more. What do you mean? She goes, well, Jon, if they're pissed or angry or disgusted or whatever at the way I look, that just means they have no context to my situation. They've never been through this themselves. They've never known somebody they love that's been through this. So I'm happy that they've never had to experience what I have. Because if they had, they never would have felt that way.
Wow.
And it was that beautiful framing that reminded me that it's not the moment, it's how we mold the moment, make the moment, give the moment meaning. And I'm reminded of that all the time. So it's mindset, right? It's how we view situations. And can I share one more story with you and your audience that I think is really...
Yeah, that's fine. I realize I kept talked to you a little over time, but
no, it's okay. I'm gonna give you 2 more, and then we can.
All right, great.
So this is so fun, and then just knowing your audience, I got to tell you this. So I was with. You remember earlier I was talking about Sophie, and the 2 people that took Sophie to the event was John and Mara Berghoff. Well, they're very close friends, and we were in Ohio. We were seeing fireworks with them. We had gone to the top of a parking garage, and I'll never forget even Mara turning to me and saying, "This is front row," because the fireworks were literally going off like almost above us. It was amazing.
Yes.
Now, that was a great idea up until the moment when you have to leave the parking garage where thousands of other cars who all parked in that parking garage to see the fireworks are all leaving at the same moment. And we're at the very top, and we were sitting there in a van with 5 children under the age of 5. It's 10 p.m. They're all melting down. They're all hungry. They all, right? Like, and you know exactly what's going on. And then right when the tent, we haven't moved for 30 minutes, not an inch. And my buddy John said, I could tell, he could tell the tension was building. And he said, let's play a game. And I said, what game is that? He said, let's play a game. This would be worse if. And the minute that he said it, I started laughing. And then, somebody goes, I'll start. And they said, this would be worse if somebody had, what did they say? They said, this would be worse if we ran out of gas. And everybody was like, yeah, that's right. We have a full tank of gas. It's 100 degrees outside. It's July and we have gas and air conditioning. This is amazing. Right. So that was like, we were all laughing. And then somebody says, hey, I think it was one of the kids might have said, this would be worse if somebody had gas. and we all busted out laughing, and we're like, yes, it would, because these windows are not going to go down. It's so hot outside. So it was just like this moment where it was all tense. And then with one question, with one suggestion, things changed. We changed the mindset of everybody in that car. That's power. And, anyway, so I had to mention that about mindset because I thought that was really funny. But then the third piece, and this is my final thought, is about environment, like you said. And that's basically the point that, look, we become like our environments. We are affected by our environment. You can have a positive attitude in the worst of environments, but let's face it, if you had a choice, you'd want to cultivate an empowering environment, and that's something that's very important. So even when my family moved to Austin, it was 3 things that were at the top of the list: culture, climate, community. Those 3 things, and those all affected our environment. And since we moved, we actually had people say, hey, John, even the problems that you have, like wherever you go, there you are. It's not going to solve your problems. And I've got news. It did solve a lot of our problems. I do think where you live is important. I do think that you have to ask what you value and then try to cultivate that environment for yourself and be bold and courageous in doing so. It was hard to move our family, hard to move away from some of my best friends, it was expensive to do it. Best decision we ever made. So.
Yeah. No, I'm so with you. I live in this funky little community where I actually know everybody's name, and we have Saturday night dinners, and it's this really interesting little place. I get that completely. John, this has been fascinating. I mean, I could probably hang out and talk to you for a long time. You tell great stories, and I really, really enjoy it. But I want people to check out your book, Read It With Me, The Front Row Factor, Transforming Your Life with the Art of Moment Making. And where can people find you, John, if they want to reach out?
Everything is at frontrowfactor.com. You can find stuff about the charity. If you wanted to nominate somebody, if you wanted to donate, if you want to get the podcast, if you want to get anything, it's all at frontrowfactor.com. We'd love to connect with you. We have a Facebook community called the Front Row Family where you can join the conversation, or you can just hit me up on Twitter and just say hello or tell me what you got from the show. I'm at Jon Vroman, JonVroman. And hey, I want to tell you, this has been fantastic, and thank you. It's a true honor. These are all minutes and moments that we don't get back in our lives, and I'm grateful that we could share a few together today.
I love that. I love that. And and I just want to tell the listener, and John reminds his guests that on the podcast. And I agree, like, you're right. Like, these are minutes and moments we don't get back. And I want to thank you for the work that you do for the children. You move my heart today in a really deep way, and I really appreciate that you're working with kids and with dads, and you're helping to create ripple effects that will shift generational patterns, and that's so valuable. So thank you so much, John.
Thank you. This is wonderful.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. I love what John talked about living in the moment, and the power of hope and the power of celebration. It just really, really moved me. So I hope it moved you as much as it moved me. If you have any questions, you can email me at hunter@mindfulmamamentor.com. That's mindfulmama, MAMA, mentor.com. And I hope that you will subscribe to the podcast, of course, and leave a rating. And I want to thank, as well, I'm talking about it, some people for some ratings. Yay! So thank you to Miss Chrissy K for your 5-star review. Thank you to Michelle Warren for your 5-star review. And thank you so much for BMG13456, your 5-star review. She was really wrote some lovely things saying, I've read so many parenting books and tried so hard over the last 2.5 years to learn how to raise my daughter, thinking it was solely based on her. How fascinating and eye-opening to realize that it's actually more about me. Amen. Yes, absolutely. So thank you so much for your kind words in the review. It really, really touches me deep in my heart. I really appreciate that. And if you would like to leave a review, it's a great way. On iTunes, I'd love to get to 100 reviews by 100 episodes, and we're at 82 right now. So if you are thinking of leaving a review, please do go do so. I would love that. I will shout you out. I'm so pleased and thankful every time you do. And I just want to, again, give you a quick reminder that my Mindful Mama Transformation Coaching Group is enrolling now. It's a 6-week group coaching program, and it is at mindfulmamamentor.com/group coaching. And if you're interested in coaching with me one-on-one, we are onto our wait list, but you can, lock in 2017 prices if you register for a clarity call now, and we'll get started early in 2018. So, and if you're in the future, hello, future person. So cool to have you hearing me in the future, now for have us connecting in the future. So thank you so much, as always, for listening. I really appreciate it, and just continue to take care of yourself and come back to that pause so that you can create more peace in yourself and therefore create more peace in the world. Have a great week. Namaste.